Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third session of Kids Managing Conflict Symposium, Annual Symposium. This is our third symposium and first one online, and we're super excited to be able to offer you, at the convenience in your own home, all of these great tools for your peer mediation toolbox. Today we have a presentation from the Museum of Tolerance, Combat Hate, which is a workshop that they have prepared to engage students in critical thinking for decoding and rejecting online hate. My name is Ann Sawyer. I'm the Vice President of Kids Managing Conflict. I'd like to introduce the President, Sally Patchett, for a welcome message.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for our third presentation for the Symposium on Kids Managing Conflict. We are just delighted to have our friends from the Museum of Tolerance with us today to talk about their amazing program that they offer at the museum. And so we invite you to just sit back and relax and listen to what Emily and Rick have to say today. Also, we'll be recording this, so we will have it available probably tomorrow up on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I will send this over to Emily Dixon, who is one of our board members, to introduce our guest from the Museum of Tolerance.
Good morning, everyone. We have two wonderful presenters. Our first presenter, Rick Eaton, is a senior researcher with the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance. As co-director of the center's Digital Terrorism and Hate project, he has supervised the production of all 22 editions of the Digital Terrorism and Hate Interactive Report. Rick regularly meets with Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, and other social networking companies to give feedback and assist in shaping policy. Rick has worked extensively with California Post, Peace Officer Standards and Training Organization, and been a subject matter expert on 11 educational telecourses produced by Post and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Rick has twice testified in congressional hearings and conducted many staff briefings on Capitol Hill. In his 34 years with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, he has conducted hundreds of training sessions with law enforcement, civic groups, and schools. Emily Thompson is a researcher for the Simon Wiesenthal Center and Museum of Tolerance. She came to the US from the UK 6 years ago after completing her master's. Her master's examined links between far-right movements and Holocaust denial. Since then, she has been researching international and domestic extremist ideologies and organizations for the Simon Wiesenthal Center as part of the Digital Terrorism and Hate project. She is currently leading the museum's newest program, Combat Hate, an interactive workshop that engages students in critical thinking for decoding and rejecting online hate. KMC Symposium welcomes Rick Eaton and Emily Thompson.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning to everyone. The good news is I don't have to do all that much today. Emily's going to do most of the presentation, but as Emily introduced me, I've been with the center for 34 years. So I was researching extremism before the digital age, and that put us in good stead to follow extremists as they went to digital media and then to the full what we know as the internet, the World Wide Web, and in 1994 and 5. What you're going to see today is something that we've taken our experience with this subject, and as the digital media, the social media came along, what it did is it really brought to fore the promise that the internet had for extremism back in 1995 when they first got online. With social media, it's given them the opportunity to communicate directly with people and have more interaction and better recruiting. So we've, as I said, we've taken that and put it into this class that you're about to see. And I think you'll find it interesting, and I will be here for questions after you see the presentation. And I'll turn it over to Emily.
Thanks very much, Rick. So good morning, everyone. As my fellow Emily mentioned, my name too is Emily. I'm a researcher over at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and I've been working at the Museum of Tolerance for the past 6 years. My work primarily supports the Wiesenthal Center's Social Action Division, and I particularly focus on our digital terrorism and hate project, which I'll talk about in a bit more depth shortly. Today, our goal is to give you, the attendees, an overview of how the internet is used to spread hateful ideologies, explore how young people are engaging with social media, and to give you an overview of our newest dynamic workshop, Combat Hate. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, the Museum of Tolerance was founded by the Simon Wiesenthal Center. The center is a Jewish human rights organization that works to confront prejudice and bigotry in all forms, researching the Holocaust and hate in a contemporary and historic context. The Museum of Tolerance is the educational arm of the center. We explore how genocide and crimes against humanity around the world have shaped the communities we live in. Our goal is really to inspire students to learn from the past, engage in the present, and assume responsibility for the future. And the museum is a recognized provider of anti-bias and critical thinking education in Los Angeles, and we've been long-term partners with Kids Managing Conflict, welcoming hundreds and hundreds of students over the years. So it's a real pleasure to be doing this workshop with you virtually today. So as Rick mentioned, we've been monitoring the proliferation of extremism online since 1986, before the advent of the internet. And since 1998, the Center has released an annual report called Digital Terrorism and Hate, which explores how the internet is used by extremists to promote their ideologies and recruit individuals. Our research is shared with law enforcement, educators, government officials, policymakers around the world. And we regularly meet with social media platforms to provide some insight on the exploitation of their services by extremists and to help advise on responses. At the beginning of March, which now feels a very long time ago, considering everything that's happened since then, we released the 22nd edition of this report. It's accessible for free via a website, digitalhate.net, and also a smartphone app. It explores a wide variety of hate movements, including white supremacy, neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-immigration, anti-LGBTQ ideologies, Islamist extremism, to name a few. And at the end of this program, I will share information on how to access this project. So I just want to firstly let everyone know that this presentation will be containing some offensive material. Everyone is welcome to mute or log off at any point if you feel uncomfortable. The project will be looking at how hate is expressed online. So I just want everyone to be on the same page about the types of things that we're going to be looking at today. So given that we're looking at hate online, I first want us to start thinking about how we as attendees to this presentation use social media, and then we'll think a little bit about how young people interact in these spaces. So Anne's going to start the first poll for me, which is just a simple question. Do you use social media? Yes or no? And this is just to get a sense in the room of who's here and what kinds of interactions we're seeing online. And if at any point you have any kind of thoughts or feelings to share, please feel free to write them in the chat. I will try and keep an eye on it. It's a little hard to manage presenting and looking at it, but I will do my best, and Rick will be on hand if there's any burning questions. So I'm seeing out of the respondents, 97% of you say we're using social media, and 3% say no. So now let's think a little bit about those platforms, what we would consider to be social media platforms. Right now on the screen, you should be seeing a series of different icons, and those represent different social media platforms that we know to be most popular with what we consider to be the adult population, so folks over the age of 18. Some of you who may have responded no may think slightly differently after looking at this slide. We would consider even platforms like YouTube to be a form of social media because you can share videos, you can leave comments, you can build your own channels. We have social media platforms that serve many different purposes. They help us stay connected, they provide entertainment, they help us to learn, to communicate, to build professional networks, and in the time of COVID, allow a lot of us to continue working from home. There are many great things about social media, not only cat videos, but many other wonderful, exciting things that we enjoy as a result, but we all know that there are many pitfalls associated with social media that we probably all have very strong opinions about. So now we've thought a little bit about how the adult audience uses social media. Let's take a moment to think about how young people, how students are using social media. So on the screen, you'll see some more icons, some representing platforms that our experience has shown these tend to be the most popular amongst the students. If you don't recognize any of them, feel free to write in the chat the names of the ones that you're not familiar with, and we can let you know what that is. We can see, comparing this to the previous slide, that there are some similarities in the platforms that different generations choose to use, especially when it comes to places like Facebook, YouTube, not Facebook. Facebook is now a relic of people's grandparents, so it's very unusual to find young people active on that platform, or at least happy to share with anyone that they're actually using it. But there are many young places where young people use different platforms to do the same things that we're doing. Communication, staying in touch, entertainment, funny videos, listening to music. The platforms are consistently evolving, and it's very hard to keep track of what the latest favorite is. Right now, during the time of COVID-19, I know that plenty of people are spending a lot of time on TikTok. We've probably all seen viral dance videos and all sorts of crazy things. People have got a lot more time on their hands to make their own original content. We also see places like Snapchat and Instagram still being consistently the favorite places for young people to be interacting. Also, we see places like Discord and Steam and Twitch, which are video game platforms, being utilized by a wide variety of young people. And then we have some of the more mainstream services as well, like Spotify, Facebook Messenger, where young people are communicating, listening to music. So there's a lot of different options out there for people to communicate on. As I said, it's constantly evolving. It's hard to stay abreast of it, even if it's your job to sit on the internet like it is for Rick and I and try and monitor what's going on. So we also look to young people as kind of experts in this field because they have the best sense of what's happening in that area. So now we've had to think about the similarities and the differences between how the kind of older generation and younger generations use social media. So now we're going to take on a second poll to think about the amount of time young people are devoting to their personal devices and primarily what they're doing when they're online. So right now you should be seeing a brief survey with 3 different questions. They're all questions about access to devices and screen time. So if you just take a moment to give your best guess for these questions, then we can get a sense of maybe what our preconceptions are about how young people use digital devices and for what purpose. And I'll just give you a minute or so because I know there's a couple of questions there to have a think. Whilst you're voting, I see some folks have got questions about Monkey. Monkey is a relatively new platform that seems to have grown in popularity, and certainly within the students that we've been working with. For those of you who may remember, there used to be a similar platform called Chat Roulette. Monkey is an app where you basically get paired with random folks to have video conversations. So it's a bit of a sketchy place, but I think it's quite appealing to young people, especially given the kind of logo and the filters and things like that that make it quite attractive to a younger audience. So it's definitely one to keep an eye out for. And then those of you who are asking about Discord, Discord is a messaging app. So it's used to be targeted specifically at the video game community to let them talk either by text or over headsets to each other whilst playing video games. But we've actually seen an increased usage of it by a more mainstream society. But more concerningly, we've seen lots of far-right groups popping up on Discord using it to spread hate and to plan for things like the Unite the Right rally in 2018 in Charlottesville, where we saw the famous Tiki Torch March and things like that. And just one more from those questions, Reddit is a very popular forum website. They've taken some steps to remove offensive content from their platform, but ultimately still a lot exists there. And as I mentioned, you'll have access to the Digital Terrorism Project at the end of this, so you can also explore some examples through that. Okay, so I see Anne has kindly shared the poll results, so we can now have a think about the first question. How many hours do teenagers, so age 13 to 18 years old, spend online? And that's excluding school and homework. So actually, the majority of folks are right on track here with their guess of 7 to 9 hours. This answer comes from the Common Sense Media Census. You can actually download this whole report from a wonderful organization called Common Sense Media. They also provide a lot of different resources on things like age-appropriate movies and video games, also many tools on media literacy. So I highly recommend everyone takes a moment to go and explore that. But in 2019, they conducted a nationwide survey that looked at media usage by tweens and teens ages 8 to 18. It's an online survey that was answered by over 1,600 students from across the USA, and they come from a broad range of ethnic, racial, and economic backgrounds. And the survey showed us that on average, teens themselves claim to be spending over 7 hours using screens on a daily basis without including the time for their schoolwork. We see with tweens, so 8 to 12 years old, they're spending closer to 5 hours. There's also a little piece in the survey that looks at the correlation between screen time and socioeconomic status, which is also a very interesting part of their research work. So we can see that despite the fact there's only 24 hours in a day and students are supposedly in school for 7 to 8 hours of it, they're still devoting a large amount of time to some kind of screen device. The following question: what is the top screen time activity for teenagers 13 to 18 years old? So 3 choices there: social media, TV and videos, and gaming. And of all the presentations, everyone tends to be along the same lines, that we assume social media is the one that folks are still spending the most time on. But actually, according to the respondents of the survey, they actually state that they spend the most time on their devices watching TV or videos. So interestingly, it's still a kind of more traditional activity, even though it may not any longer be sitting in front of a physical television set. Then secondly, we actually see video games taking up a large portion of people's time. And then thirdly, social media. Someone in a previous presentation brought up a very good point that these categories probably intersect to some level. So you may be on Snapchat whilst you're watching TV and maybe playing a video game as well. The capacity for multitasking is remarkable. But what this survey did was it asked students to apportion the amount of hours. So even if they're doing them simultaneously, we still see that the most amount of time is being dedicated to watching TV and video. So hopefully this slide is helpful in terms of helping us understand what's going on. We often probably see young people or adults with their heads in their phone and kind of make assumptions about what they're doing. So it's useful to have some data from the young people themselves to understand how they're using those devices. And finally, by age 12, what percentage of students own a smartphone? So we're kind of fairly evenly split on this one across the last 3 answers. 20% of folks think it's probably around 49%, then about a third saying 69%, and then the highest majority, 38%, suggesting that maybe there's 83% of students who own a smartphone by age 12. So the correct answer as per the survey is 69%. This survey is being conducted over a number of years, so they actually have another one that they can compare it to from 2015. In 2019, we see that smartphone ownership age 12 of the respondents is at 69%, which is up from 41% in 2015. So in 4 years, we've seen a 30% increase nearly in the ownership. It's also quite interesting to look at the younger demographic there and see that even amongst 8-year-olds who were surveyed, approximately 20% of them own a smartphone. Whether or not these devices have like an internet cell plan or not, it's very interesting to see the large proportion of students that own a device that has some capacity to connect to the internet. And obviously, as folks get older, by age 18, 91% of the respondents said they were owners of smartphones. So the trends are interesting. The data suggests that access to these devices is increasing. So I would highly recommend you check out this survey to kind of get a better grip and understanding of what's going on, because we all have preconceptions about young people in social media. I think it's helpful to hear from them to see how they understand and perceive their usage of it. So we've explored the access that young people have to smart devices and how they report using them. So now let's think a little bit about where students become more vulnerable to hate and extremist messaging through their personal devices. So we're going to think about some examples of platforms popular with young people and how they've been exploited to promote hate, and some examples where this content is actually being generated by young people themselves. So we know that memes, kind of viral images, are incredibly popular across all generations. I know since the coronavirus has started, I have received a serious amount of memes from my parents, from the Holocaust survivors of the Museum of Tolerance. So this is now a phenomenon that I think spans all generations, people wanting to share humor in a difficult time. Memes have been popular for a very long time, and in particular, Instagram is a place where there are numerous accounts dedicated to sharing this type of content. Usually they're inoffensive and funny, but frequently we do see memes promoting racism and bigotry, like this one on the screen, insulting the civil rights icon Rosa Parks. The accounts often use hashtags like #RacistMemesAreFunny to reach a wider audience, and students that we've worked with have shared with us that they've been part of different conversations where they compete with their peers to share the most offensive or shocking meme within a private group. So you can see some of the different hashtags there. It allows basically the memes to be all gathered in one place. So it's a good thing if you like American football. You can look at #American football and look at all the stuff to do with that. But regretfully, if you're interested in some of this more offensive content, you could go to #RacistMeme and be exposed to a large amount of those. And there are various methods and plans in place from these different social media companies to try and remove or censor some of this content, but ultimately it's still a work in progress. I mentioned Snapchat, so we've also seen similar behavior on Snapchat. On the left, you can see a young person impersonating a member of the Ku Klux Klan, using a racist slur as a caption on their picture. And then on the right, we have a 2019 image from Orange County. There was a series of high school students who went to a party to play beer pong, but they decided to play beer pong in the shape of a swastika. And these images went viral. The Museum of Tolerance was involved in some programming down there to try and help them understand better the significance of symbols like this. But we've also seen images like this from other states, like this from 2018 in Wisconsin. A class of high school seniors were going to their prom and they decided to give a Hitler salute, which went viral. I'm sure most folks on this call are probably familiar with this image. We see a couple of the participants not participating in this salute. But what we are seeing to some extent is the increasing normalization of hateful symbols and gestures, both online and offline, and situations where we see young people perhaps exercising poor judgment can really have lasting consequences in terms of their future, because things like this stay online forever. I mentioned TikTok also. TikTok is still growing as one of the most popular platforms with young audiences. Just this last month, an anti-Semitic video was created and uploaded to TikTok by a high school student in Minnesota. The video was posted under the banner of Me and the Boys on the Way to Camp. It depicted two young men strutting up a ramp into a boxcar, which transported victims to Auschwitz-Birkenau. They then did a dance on this virtual boxcar train, and then skipped on the virtual tracks into Auschwitz-Birkenau. We've also found videos glorifying shooters like the perpetrators of the Columbine massacre, and individuals like Dylan Roof, who murdered 9 African Americans in a church in North Carolina in 2015. Many of these videos are being created by young people on their own profiles. Similarly, we've seen user accounts and playlists praising and parodying individuals like Adolf Hitler and again Dylan Roof on music platforms like Spotify. One area that in particular that we looked at last year as part of our digital terror release for 2019 is a website called iFunny. It's a meme posting website created actually back in 2011 that's become popular for sharing offensive memes, with some overtly hateful material being shared by far-right users. It's typically frequented by a younger demographic, which makes some of the content found there all the more alarming. Last year, one of our interns found this user, Minnesota Nationalist. They're an iFunny user who actually made threats against federal agents and government officials. They actually posted their high school diploma with their name, hometown, school very clearly visible, and our interns did some tracking down and found the individual who had created this account very quickly. In addition to anti-Semitic and Holocaust denial memes, they posted content like this. But alarmingly, they also posted a picture of 2 weapon magazines, which you can see on the left, the one painted tyranny remover and the other labeled with the names of gun control legislation and government agencies. On the right, you can see the magazines used by Brenton Tarrant in his attack on the 2 mosques in New Zealand. So you can see the evident parallels and kind of mimicking of his attack there. So this was posted to iFunny as well. But the user alarmingly also instructed prospective shooters that if you plan on shooting a place up, please do us a favor and target politicians instead of normal people. You'll make a bigger statement and your name will be heard. So the investigative research identified the user as a 19-year-old young man in Minnesota who was reported to the FBI. So we are regretfully also seeing young people being activated online and actually committing offenses and posting a record of their attempts and attacks on the internet. Finally, most recently, we've seen an upsurge in anti-Semitic and racist content being shared online in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This message comes from the Russian messaging app called Telegram, which called on people who might be infected to go and visit their local synagogue to share the virus. This poster encouraged infected parties to cough on their local minority. And this image on the right specifically actually targeted Asian Americans, arguing that China had been responsible for many deadly pandemics, and as a result, Asians should be expelled from the USA. And then finally, this poster was circulated: if you have the bug, give a hug, spread the flu to every Jew, with this phrase hollow cough in reference to the Holocaust. So we are seeing the aggressive use of COVID-19 as a weapon against minority groups being spread online with some offline results. So is it really realistic to expect ourselves to be the guardians of our children, our students, the people in our care for the 4, 5, 6, 7+ hours that they say they are spending on their screens, and attempt to ensure that they simply don't come across this offensive material? That's really what we would consider a somewhat impossible expectation. So now I want us to think about how the Museum of Tolerance is trying to provide some support and resources in that area. So for those of you who've had the pleasure of visiting our museum, you may be familiar with this exhibit. If you haven't had the chance, we look forward to welcoming everyone once our doors reopen. This exhibit, Global Hate, is part of a broader exhibit called Confronting Hate in America in our Tolerance Center. and it explores the impact of crimes motivated by hate on communities and how communities are coming together to respond in the wake of such incidents. And you can see the monitors on the second image there have access to our digital terrorism project to encourage students to think about the role that the internet plays in promoting hate online. So this is a topic that we've been engaging in dialogue with students for many years. This is one of the reasons why we decided to develop Combat Hate, to give students the opportunity to explore their role in the dissemination of prejudice and discrimination online. Our goal is to empower young people to take a more proactive and responsible approach to the way they interact online. The workshop has been in development for several years, and we've been piloting it with grant funding this school year. We served over 4,000 students in middle and high schools before the school system was impacted by COVID-19. It's a 50-minute workshop designed to complement pre-existing curriculum standards, and we're now offering it in a digital format as well, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So what is the Combat Hate workshop? Well, as we mentioned at the start, it's designed to help students decode and analyze hate online. We developed it through 4 research lenses, which really reflect the goals that we set for the program. The first is the lens of media literacy. So the workshop is engaging students in the application of media literacy tools as a fundamental skill for decoding and analyzing media. Secondly, we're encouraging digital citizenship, which is an increasingly important area of social and civic responsibility. So the curriculum is actually aligned to international standards. Thirdly, as with all museum programs, we focus on this bystander approach. We make sure that our workshop is relevant for all students because everyone is a potential target, but everyone is invited and challenged to make a positive difference to benefit everyone in their community. We're aiming to provide support to students who may be victims of hateful content online, as well as addressing students who perhaps may be engaging and sharing this type of material. And then finally, it's based on an empowerment model. The workshop is solution oriented, so we then move from analysis to action, and students learn that they can make a difference in many different ways and spend time discussing their options in a take-home action plan. So as we've been conducting these workshops in schools, we've been conducting surveys with the students, and we're now undertaking the analysis of the results. So from approximately 1,800 that we've put into our system so far, after the students took the workshop, over a third of students stated that they saw harmful or hateful content online on a daily basis, and a further third state that they see it on a weekly basis. So the reality is that students are faced with this material, whether they are seeking it out or not, and therefore we need to work to better equip them with some tools to confront it. So our workshop really begins in a similar manner to how we started today, with a lively discussion about how students use social media, what their favorite platforms are, what they like, what they don't like. It's a really great way to get started. They love the opportunity to talk about Instagram and TikTok in the classroom. It's an unusual topic of conversation in school, certainly in a formal setting, so it's a great way to get them sharing their opinions and their thoughts. And then we share this image as we begin to introduce them to the core skills of media literacy. So this poster actually comes from an art exhibition in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It was titled The Eternal Jew. It was the largest pre-war anti-Semitic exhibit produced by the Nazis. And we use this image to have students begin assessing media. So what do they see? What clues can they take from this image to help them understand what the goal of it is? What is the intention? And the 5 questions on the right come from the Center for Media Literacy, really helping to guide the students through a methodology of how to analyze media. So having them think about who created it, the fact that media messages are constructed in some way, what techniques do they use to attract attention, that we know media has a creative language with its own rules. How might different people interpret this message? So obviously everyone interprets messaging differently, even if it's the same message. Media has embedded values and points of view. So we want students to think about what those are. And then finally, why would someone create something like that? Is it for profit? Is it to gain power? Is it to express a particular opinion? And what we find is that students already inherently are doing many of these things when they look at media pieces. But we use this as a sample for the group activity. The Nazis didn't have social media, obviously, but today that's where we see a lot of folks sharing their opinions and their thoughts. And like the time of Nazi Germany, people can manipulate these platforms to express hateful and bigoted sentiments and ideologies. So then we move to sharing some examples from today's social media, curated by the Wiesenthal Center's research department, which is work that Rick and I have done. So we give them a series of different handouts. They split into groups, small groups for discussion. The handouts are purposefully watermarked to try and ensure that these things can't be taken out of context. They are censored to some degree because we don't want students verbatim repeating what we're sharing, but the reality is that the majority of these things are not particularly shocking to the audiences that we're sharing them with. If you have any thoughts or opinions about what you're seeing here, what you think student reactions might be, feel free to share them in the chat box. We always start with this first example that comes from Twitter, an example of so-called funny racist jokes. One thing that we're very mindful of is engaging students in conversation about the power of humor as a tool to spread prejudice. Much of the content that young people are finding online that's hateful in some way is often guised in humor, usually as a meme or a joke. And we're also using this example to build empathy, that students usually end up leading discussions in the classroom then about the harm that racist jokes can cause, why they shouldn't be accepted, and ways in which that they can respond if they see them online. Another example we have presents the concept of Holocaust denial. We use this example to explore the importance of fact-checking what students are seeing online, especially when it comes through platforms like Instagram, which are designed to present limited amounts of information. It's very interesting when we do these workshops, we ask the students where they get their news from, and the majority of them say that they get their news through social media. So it's important to recognize the power that these platforms have in terms of influencing young people in their opinions and their understanding of the world. Students tend to be familiar with the idea of conspiracy theories and fake news, so this example allows us to help them discuss how they can be competent digital citizens by accessing a broad range of sources, but also being aware that material online can look credible and even scientific, but hide an agenda. And we use this example about Anne Frank, someone they're usually familiar with, a very familiar Holocaust denial conspiracy that Anne Frank's diary was written in a pen that didn't exist at the time, therefore it can't be real. If you were then to go and Google Anne Frank's diary pen, you would find tons of information on the internet that looks very convincing, stating that scientific studies have proved that there's no way that diary can be real. So we want them to be mindful about the fact that when you go online, even if you see something that confirms your opinion that you may have seen on social media, that you need to be really careful about where you're getting your information from, and be mindful of the ways in which media can be designed to influence you to believe a certain way. This piece, Border Patrol, is a video game. It allows the player to shoot stereotypical depictions of Mexicans attempting to cross into the United States. We briefly looked at a couple of platforms earlier in our discussion, and we can see how popular video games are with young people. So one of the reasons we include this example is to encourage students to think about how effective games can be to communicate messages and how they can be weaponized. This one also in particular is quite valuable in the Los Angeles area. Obviously we have a high Latinx population. They're dealing with a lot of prejudice against their community right now. So this game in particular brings up a lot of important conversation around that issue. The assumption in most of the classrooms is that this is a new game that maybe came around 2016, but actually this was created in the early 2000s. So it's also helpful to show that these things have a historic trajectory, that many of the prejudices and hate that we see in our society today have very long-standing roots and history. And finally, we always end with this example. which is a part of a website titled Kick a Ginger Day. We have many different examples that we can swap into the program to make it relevant for the audience. So perhaps if a school is dealing with anti-LGBTQ issues or Islamophobia, we can swap in some examples that help students discuss those topics. So it's designed to be adaptable for the communities that we serve. We also try and use different images depending on whether it's a middle or a high school audience. But this piece comes out of an episode of South Park in 2005. South Park intended to be satirical, but somebody took an episode seriously and created a Facebook event encouraging students to assault their redheaded classmates. As a result of this, we actually see attacks on redheaded students in the US and the UK every year. So we show this example as a bridging piece, so students can understand the power that these so-called jokes can have, and how, while they may interpret it in one way, someone else may interpret it differently, and how this online content can have serious offline consequences. And this really leads to the kind of crux of the program, is that hate has consequences. So we talk to students about some of the common themes that they see in the previous examples and the impact that hate online can have on these individuals and communities. And we talk about this because in recent years, we've seen an increasing number of incidents where actions taken in real life have been inspired, at least in some part, by online activity. So I'm sure we recognize many of the events listed on the screen here. Regretfully, in the last couple of years, there's been a real acceleration in the number. We saw obviously the mosque shooting in New Zealand, the attack on El Paso, attack on the Walmart in El Paso. We've seen numerous attacks on synagogues in the US and in Germany too. And then also targeting of other minority groups, such as the Sikh temple shooting and the attack on the African American church in North Carolina. So regretfully, we do see that things that are said online can have a terrible consequences offline. And we're not suggesting that everything a student interacts with will end up this end game scenario. Our goal is to try and shift the balance on what we consider to be normal and acceptable online. We want them to now move from knowledge building to activism. So what's the purpose of us showing this content? We want them to understand that they all have a role to play as digital citizens, that we all have boundaries and guidelines that we live by in our own real life communities, and that we should be extending those to the digital communities that we inhabit too. We want them to understand their role as digital citizens, and we show them some wonderful examples of campaigns and young leaders who are having an impact in promoting kindness and rejecting hate and extremism, because as much as we want to try and stop the spread of hate and extremism, we also want to create a counter message there of kindness and acceptance and tolerance, very much in line with the Museum of Tolerance's main goals and mission. So then we engage the students in a conversation about what they can do if they encounter hateful or offensive material online. And they usually are already fairly well versed in things like reporting, but this is a really important time for them to understand the power that their kind of local community has. So if I, as Emily, report one thing, it may not have a big impact, but if I got my whole class to come together and report something, you may have more of a significant voice. And we offer up some options through our action plan. Which I will be sharing with the team after this, and it will be emailed out to all the participants on Friday. The action plan features suggestions on ways in which students can respond to hate online, with space for them to share their own reflections. So you can see there's a variety of different things that we've identified as being possible avenues, like talking to someone. One of the goals of bringing this program into classrooms is to build relationships of trust, that we want students to recognize that their teachers, their counselors, even their school resource officers, their principals are allies in this field, and that they are people that they can reach out to and speak to. And by bringing it into the classroom, the students have shown that this is an important topic and something that needs to be addressed. We talk about taking digital control, so things that you can do actively to stop content from appearing on your feed. And then counter narratives. So what I was saying about building tolerance and respect and understanding, and then different ways that people can get involved. So how can you stay connected with human rights organizations? How can you support victims of hate? And then we leave them space to write their own solutions into what other things they can think of. We have some samples of some different campaigns that exist, and then ways to stay connected with the Museum of Tolerance. And these include our own social media platforms. So one thing that we piloted very early on was a smartphone app called Combat Hate, which still exists. You can download it for free. We're encouraging students to take pictures of content if they see it online, maybe a website or a comment, or offline if they saw a bus stop with a swastika or a noose graffitied on it. They can actually send that content over to the Museum of Tolerance and actually become kind of ambassadors on our behalf so that we can work to take down that material to get involved with local law enforcement. So that has also evolved onto social media platforms as we realized that storage space is a very precious commodity on the phone of any teenager. So they're already on places like Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and maybe even Facebook. So they can actually connect directly with us to share the content if they find something offensive. So in that way, we're also empowering them as individuals that there are things that they can do, because so often it feels very hopeless in this type of work that there's nothing you can do to make a difference. But the reality is that our work is very successful because it relies on individuals to come and share experiences that they've had and to share things that they've seen. And so this is another outlet for students to explore. So as I mentioned, originally this workshop was going into schools as a physical program, but now due to obviously the school shutdown, we are launching it digitally, a virtual workshop for students. It's designed for 8th through 12th grade. You can visit our website, museumoftolerance.com/combat hate, to learn more about the workshop. We can also plan to schedule it in person in the kind of short to long-term future, depending on what happens. Also, if you have youth groups or community groups where you have groups of students, it doesn't have to necessarily be an 8th grade history class. We're also looking to see how we can share this information with those types of groups. All these links will be emailed out on Friday as well. I mentioned our digital hate project. So if you were to visit digitalhate.net, you can actually explore the project and explore some of the examples that I shared today. It's also available as a smartphone app. So if you want to carry a version of this around in your pocket at all times, please feel free to do so. It's the only app called Digital Terrorism and Hate on the App Store and the Android store. We are also offering a series of different youth programs right now through the Museum of Tolerance, because we know that we are unable to serve students in person. So we're offering virtual programming, which can also be found through our website, museumoftolerance.com/youth-programs. You can find it all through the homepage very easily as well. So we've tried to bring some of our exhibits online. So we have a workshop that looks at the life of Anne Frank. We have some other programs that look at things like youth voices during the Holocaust. So there's lots of different assets that we have made available online with our own facilitators. They're designed to be interactive and engaging to offer to our community whilst we all wait out this experience working from home. And finally, if there are educators, California educators on this call, we also have a fantastic department called Tools for Tolerance, which has a branch that deals specifically with educators. You can actually enroll for free on virtual professional development programs. There's a wide range to choose from. We're updating the dates every month. Again, you can take a more extensive course on the story of Anne Frank. You can explore our Tolerance Center in a virtual way. So we have lots of content there that's available for individuals or for groups. So if you're part of a faculty, you could sign up as a team and we can customize a program. So we have lots of things going on at the Museum of Tolerance to keep everyone busy during this time. I am very jealous of those folks who seem to have a bit of downtime whilst COVID-19 is happening. We are probably busier than ever. But it's a fantastic way for us to connect in a whole new way to communities that perhaps wouldn't usually have the opportunity to come physically to the museum. So that's it. That's everything from myself. You are now connected with me forever. So my email is on the screen. If you have questions, concerns, thoughts, questions about booking, boring questions about logistics, I'm happy to field all of those. You can contact me via email.
Holly, we do have one question that came up on the chat from Leslie.
Great. Yes, so I was going to say, if folks have
She
questions.
wanted to know, like, what happens when somebody reports an incident to you of hate. I'm assuming this came through the app. If somebody reports something to you, what do you all do with it?
Rick, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I'll take that one. Those reports actually come directly to me, and it depends on what the information is. And the app does not, because we're dealing with young people, it does not specifically require that they give us, their personal information or contact information. If we receive something, for example, one of the earliest ones that we received was a case of bullying in a school, and they named the school. We will make every effort to contact someone in that case. If it's graffiti or something like that, we have ways to report it. If it's a website or social media, as Emily said, we deal regularly with the major social media companies, and I have contacts with them. So it's really based on the kind of information that we get, and if it takes more detail, if we offer them a place to give us contact information, but it's not required.
And there was another question about, do you think that this program is relevant for high school students as well?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not sure if it was clear, but this is designed for middle and high school students. So that's our target audience for sure.
I think us adults could probably benefit quite a bit from it too.
Yeah.
Being a mother of a 15-year-old, almost 16-year-old, I thought I knew all of this, and I learned already that I don't. So thank you.
Yeah, I apologize for sometimes being a bit of a grim reaper in this scenario. We have done parent programs as well. So when we've gone into a school, I can come and deliver a program in advance to the parents, because it's equally as important to get the parents on the same page. They're crying out for information in this realm. So it's something that we're more than happy to offer as well.
Great. We had one of our grant schools, Madrona Middle School, who brought all of their peer mediators to the museum and went through, and they were all just so excited about what they learned and had sent letters of thank you. And most of them said that it would help make them better peer mediators because of the experiences and what they learned at the museum. So thank you so much for having the museum and having it available for the students to attend.
Emily, why don't you explain the Redlands situation, because that was quite unique.
Yeah, we had a thank you. I can't personally take credit for the existence of the museum, but as the representative, I will say thank you on their behalf. We can't do anything without the students' involvement, and the whole thing is designed to be interactive, to hear from them. So I'm glad to hear that that is reflected in their responses to their visits, because our goal is to give them a platform to share their feelings as well. So we had an incident with a school district in the greater Los Angeles region where they had an incident of anti-Semitic bullying at their school. So we actually created a kind of intervention program by partnering with them. We originally delivered some educator programming to their, I believe it was their history department, or maybe the English department, their teachers, so that they could become our partners in the classroom. We then came in and delivered the programming but we had a partner in each classroom. So the students could see that this was something the school was taking very seriously in terms of the actual anti-Semitic bullying that had happened. But the teachers became really valuable allies for us, because obviously, while the workshop is impactful, something that can make it even more impactful is those long-term relationships. So the principal was heavily engaged in making this happen. He's looking forward to trying to continue it over the next few years to make sure that all of his students have access to this material. So we've been very lucky in creating these kind of custom programs where we can bring the whole community in to deal with the problem.
Great.
Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap this up? Please feel free to pop in if you have any other questions before we conclude this workshop.
There is one question in the chat box apparently about partnering with other groups and programs like Sesame Street. To my knowledge, we have not really thought about that, and I find interesting Sesame Street. I'm not sure that they like to deal with the kind of negative material that we do, but we have not really done. This is still a fledgling program. We've been working with a grant from the state and are exploring other options as we make it available on a large scale. But right now we've only done these in LA and Chicago and New York, where we have offices, and we're working to partner with some other human rights organizations and educational outlets in different cities around the country.
But if folks have contacts and things that you think might be valuable, like, we're very much open to talking further about partnerships and expanding this program as we're moving forward. So you have my email address if that's something you want to get in touch about. Please feel free. We can try our best. I know that we have a great partner who's on the call today from the LA Superior Court, the Teen Court Program. Leslie Kassoff working with the Shades program. If anyone's interested in learning more about that, you can contact me. It's a program that runs through the Museum of Tolerance during the summertime with the Teen Court, teaching jurors to deal with hate crimes from their peers in the Teen Court setting. So if folks have questions about that too, it's a wonderful alternative to the traditional justice system. It focuses on reformative justice and peer mediation as a kind of key capstone of that. So if anyone's interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to put you in touch with Leslie and her team.
I had a question on your virtual workshops. Do you provide assignments that students could turn in to their teachers for credit during the this time, the COVID-19?
We could certainly come up with assignments. We do have lesson plans through the Museum of Tolerance website that would augment combat hate in particular. But yeah, extension activities and things like that, we're more than happy to talk about and think of ways in which we can expand this. One thing I'd really like to do is kind of get a response from students and things they can be doing. So there's another wonderful organization called Us Versus Them, where they run student art projects. So something along those lines, I think, where students can express their reactions and responses to this kind of material, I think would be really nice. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, just an amazing wealth of information. Thank you so much, Emily and Rick, for participating this week in the symposium, especially when we had to change it to a new format. I know that we've been working with you all for a long time, and I know I speak for the group when I say we're greatly appreciative of you participating and sharing, and hopefully we all are coming away with more tools in our toolbox and more information. And just to remind everyone, we will be sending out links and email addresses and materials to everybody who's registered today, as well as the recording, which will be available in case you want to share it or share any information that with somebody that wasn't able to make it today. So this concludes our third day. We have 2 more sessions, Thursday and Friday. Tomorrow is a really good panel as well. It's peer mediation in schools and beyond. It's a panel of administrators who've had to implement the program of peer mediation in their school and their challenges and the benefits and everything that they've had to deal with. And then Friday, which is the day I always love the most, is interacting with the actual peer mediators, some who are done being peer mediators in school and now are in college, but we'll talk about the benefits across the board, both in school and personally at home, that going through a program like this, it has assisted them in going into college. And if you, as always, if you have any questions, reach out. I want to thank Sally and thank Emily Dixon as well. We have a great team at KMC, and none of this would be able to be pulled off if we didn't have the support that we have. There's also an unspoken person in the background, Madeline, our administrative assistant, who is highly involved as well. And so many thanks to all of you for attending and participating, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.